We all know the story, right? Bitcoin has no ruler, no CEO. It's the whole point. But what if that's not quite the whole story? What if there's a quiet, unseen power struggle happening right now for the very soul of Bitcoin? Let's get into it. I mean, if you go to the official sources, the answer seems pretty clear. Bitcoin.org says that everyone controls Bitcoin: the miners who secure the network, the developers who write the code, and the holders, people who actually use it. It's a beautiful idea, this perfectly decentralized system. But in the real world, things are starting to get a lot more complicated. There are some incredibly powerful, organized forces out there trying to tip this delicate balance. And it kind of makes you wonder if that beautiful ideal is really matching up with our new reality. And the first major player stepping onto the field isn't some rogue coder in a basement. Nope, it's Wall Street. We're talking about giants like BlackRock, the biggest asset manager on the planet. And they are bringing their full weight to bear on the network. So how do you even try to control something that's specifically designed to be uncontrollable? Well, you can't just launch a direct attack. Think of it like this. It's like trying to take over a country that has no government. You can't just storm the Capitol building. Instead, you have to slowly, quietly, gain influence over its most important groups, its key power centers. And that is exactly the playbook we're seeing. It's this really sophisticated, three-pronged strategy that targets the very groups that are supposed to keep Bitcoin decentralized in the first place: the miners, the developers, and the holders. Okay, let's start with the miners, the very bedrock of Bitcoin's security. More and more of the biggest mining companies are now publicly traded, mostly right here in the US. And this makes them vulnerable, right? Because now they have to answer to shareholders and play by government rules, which creates this huge lever of influence. And we're not talking about a small piece of the action. Last we checked, about a third of Bitcoin's entire global hash rate, the network's computing power, was coming from these public miners in the US. That's a massive, centralized point of pressure on a system that's supposed to be decentralized. So who are these big shareholders pulling the levers? Well, surprise, surprise. It's the absolute titans of traditional finance: BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, State Street. These are the firms famous for using their shareholder power to shape corporate policy, and now they have a direct line into Bitcoin security infrastructure. Now for prong number 2, the developers, the people who write the code, the very heart of Bitcoin. We're now seeing asset managers, smaller ones for now like Bitwise and VanEck, donating parts of their ETF profits to fund Bitcoin's core development. Now their hearts might be in the right place, but this sets a really dangerous precedent. What happens when the real giants decide to do the same, but with much, much bigger checks? And finally, we have the holders. Those super popular spot Bitcoin ETFs are kind of a double-edged sword. Sure, they bring in tons of new investment, which is great, but they also concentrate massive amounts of Bitcoin under the control of just a few institutions. So instead of millions of people holding their own keys, you've got a few big custodians holding Bitcoin for millions of people. And this is where it gets really wild. You have to read the fine print. Buried deep in BlackRock's own ETF terms and conditions, there's a clause that gives them the right to decide which version of Bitcoin to support if the network ever splits or forks. This isn't just some abstract power, it's a contractual right they gave themselves to literally help steer the future of the network. But just when it seems like Wall Street is pulling off this quiet, flawless takeover, we get a plot twist. A really powerful, crypto-native player is stepping into the ring. And they're not just competing, they are actively fighting back. And here's our unlikely defender, Tether. The often controversial but undeniably massive company behind the USDT stablecoin. They're looking at this Wall Street push and seeing it as a genuine threat to the network's neutrality, so they are launching a huge counteroffensive to protect Bitcoin's original spirit. And get this, look at how they're doing it. They are basically mirroring Wall Street's own strategy, but for a crypto-native cause. They're funding independent Bitcoin development. They're pouring hundreds of millions into building their own mining operations to try and dominate the hash rate. And they're buying up unbelievable amounts of Bitcoin for their reserves, making sure a huge chunk of the supply stays in crypto-native hands. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool, but this is David versus Goliath, right? Wrong. And this is what just blows my mind. In 2024, Tether's profits were a staggering $13 billion. That is more than double the profits of BlackRock. Tether isn't just putting up a fight. They actually have more financial firepower to bring to the table. So what we're really looking at here isn't a takeover at all. It's a high-stakes tug-of-war. You've got two unbelievably powerful sides pulling on opposite ends of the rope, with the entire future of Bitcoin hanging right there in the middle. So let's just break it down one more time. On one side, you've got traditional finance, led by BlackRock. They're using their institutional power through ETFs, their influence as shareholders, and their close ties to regulators. And on the other side, you have the crypto-native camp, with Tether at the front, fighting back with their own mining operations, their own developer funding, and a massive war chest of actual Bitcoin. This whole thing sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? A huge battle that could just tear the network in two. But here's the final, really counterintuitive twist. This conflict might actually be the best thing that could have happened to Bitcoin. So here's the big idea. Maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. Maybe Bitcoin isn't successful because it's this peaceful place where nobody is in charge. Maybe it's successful precisely because these powerful competing groups are in a constant battle for influence. This tug-of-war creates a sort of dynamic equilibrium. Neither side can get the upper hand. Their competing ambitions basically cancel each other out, and it forces the network to stay right in the middle, to stay neutral. So, paradoxically, the constant fight for control is exactly what guarantees its decentralization. This balance of power makes Bitcoin stronger than ever, but it all depends on both sides continuing to pull as hard as they can. So the question we're left with is a pretty big one. What happens if one of these giants stumbles? What happens if one side just lets go of the rope? Hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, you should definitely go follow, like, and share the podcast What Bitcoin Taught Me. You can find them pretty much everywhere on Twitter/X, Nostr, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in.